useful to try to change it. But fundamentally, if we're looking at a society, like a country-sized paradigm like Israel, we need the system to continue functioning because we all rely on it. So if we're trying to change it, we don't want to break it. And when you break a system, that's called revolution. That's what that word roughly means, right? So you have a monarchy, you drag all the nobles and kings and queens out in the street, chop their heads off, get together in a big building and try to figure something else out. That's what the French did, right? That's the French Revolution. Now, revolutions are really messy. If you break the paradigm down completely, then it's hard to get food from point A to point B. Like in our current paradigm, you would turn on the switch and there'd be no light. You'd open the faucet, there'd be no water. You can mess things up in a big way if you break the paradigm. So when people start talking about fossil fuels and stuff like that and how awful they are, I sometimes, sort of for fun, say, if I had a button and you could push it and stop all the oil, all the gasoline, all the natural gas and coal from being moved, used, or burned, would you push the button?
Yes.
Really? Are you sure? Think about what the consequences of that would be. If you push that button to have it stop immediately, think about what the consequences that would be. As much as you might hate fossil fuels, boy, hopefully before your finger hits that button, some voice in your head is going to say, no!
But taking the other hand, Tim, what will happen if we don't change dramatically, rapidly, to change that fossil fuel paradigm?
Absolutely have to. Absolutely have to. And I'm rooting for a rapid evolution instead of a revolution and a breakdown, personally. I'm always shooting for that, because my attitude when I listen to anarchists and stuff who are talking about, breaking down the systems and the structures, my thought is, you've never actually been through a revolution, have you? Talk to someone who lives in Mogadishu about, living in a society where someone's broken down all the structures. Ask them if that's a good idea, so.
India when the British left at 47. Total chaos.
Right. So from my personal experience, Romania, 9 months after a violent revolution in 1989, they still had huge trouble with food supply, rampant inflation.
Right.
That was relatively mild.
Right.
But it very much fell in disarray.
And part of the assumption of the anarchists, I remember, Uri Gavrieli, who I don't think is here tonight, but many of you know, showed me some really cool anarchist websites from some people who'd really thought about it carefully. She ran into a few of them, and I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. I'm reading it. And I could see all through it this implicit assumption that if you just tore down the structures, the thing that happened after that would be much better than what we currently have. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty big assumption. Pretty big assumption. And if you think about what led to the Nazis in World War II and all that, it was exactly that. It was a huge breakdown in the systems in Germany, where they had such big inflation that people were repricing all the products twice a day, and people were like bringing wheelbarrows of money into the store to buy one loaf of bread. And it was exactly that breakdown. Something did grow out of that, but maybe not what we would have wanted. So it's a pretty big assumption to assume that if you just tear the whole thing apart, something really cool will necessarily happen as a result. So I always want to hear the anarchists' plan for the next day after the structures break down.
They know how to break. That's all.
What happens after that? What's the new one look like? Give me some details. Good. So because of all the complexity, I often liken trying to change paradigms while you're still relying on them. It would be kind of like driving down the highway in a car, opening up the hood while you're going 70 or 80 kilometers an hour, and trying to retrofit the engine from a diesel to a biodiesel, or from a gasoline engine to an electric one, while continuing to drive the car. Right? So it's not that simple. So now I want to get into some of the attitudes and beliefs that we as change agents may hold that will make that task easier or harder. And the first one, the one I talk about every chance I get, has to do with the paradigm of how change agents view changing paradigms. Here's the process, by my observation, you can tell me if this is true or not, of when change agents want to change a paradigm, how they go about it. Generally speaking, this isn't everybody, but there's a lot of this. What they tend to do, or we, I should say, I'm a change agent, what we tend to do is look at the current system, notice a feature of it that we particularly dislike, point to it and say, that particular feature of the current paradigm is completely unacceptable. It's awful. It needs to be changed. And then, usually, try to assign blame for that feature of the system. It exists because of them. They're the ones who are benefiting from this feature, or the ones who created it. And then seek to rally other people to agree, A, that this feature is unacceptable, and B, that it's their fault. Now, my question is, what's the next step after that? Because it doesn't seem to get past that point, in my
Well, they
experience.
could put them up against the wall.
Because whoever they are, they usually aren't aligned with being blamed for the whole thing. And if they are benefiting from that feature of the current paradigm, usually aren't aligned that it's evil and must be destroyed immediately either. And now we get into a conflict of ideas where I and the people I successfully rallied to my cause are declaring loudly that this is evil and must be destroyed, and those people are doing their best to ignore us or defend it or protect that feature, and everybody else is doing their best to ignore us. The problem I see with that is what I've now created is a polarized system in which I'm trying to attack this feature of the current paradigm, and they're trying to defend this feature of the current paradigm.
This is how conflict evolves.
This is how conflicts arise. Now, two basic problems with this. There's a lot, but let's focus on two. One is, I have not actually put forth a vision of how the system can function correctly without that feature. My dislike for it is not a revised and upgraded system. If I successfully pull that thing out, it may turn out to be a load-bearing wall. Right? If I don't like this wall and try to get rid of it, well, Yossi's in the way, he might stop me. He might defend the current paradigm of his house. But if I try to take out this wall because I don't like that wall could be holding up the ceiling. I might later regret that decision. Oops. But I didn't know that the wall was holding up the ceiling. I was trying to make things better, honest. Even if I am right, if this other group is benefiting from it, they're going to staunchly defend it. So A, I don't have a plan for how it's supposed to work better or different without that feature. And B, now that I'm in a conflict with them, no one's actually changing the paradigm. We're just arguing about the paradigm. And a polarized situation like that is actually quite stable. In chemistry, it's called an ionic bond. If you get a positively charged particle and a negatively charged particle stuck together like that, it's really stable. It's very hard to change.
Table salt is an example.
Table salt is an excellent example of that.
The
Right?
crystals of table salt.
The crystals
Very
of table
strong.
salt are quite strong. They're very well bonded together.
Until you put them in water.
So you put them in water. And they start to- So that stable ionic bond between the pro-change and the anti-change can go on as a stable, unchanging system of its own. Now we have a new paradigm that consists in trying to change this feature and not trying to change this feature. That paradigm is very stable and can go on for a long time. A really good example of this is the 99% 1%. Right? You guys had the 10 cities, we had the Occupy Wall Street. So now we get a large group of people angry about the granted numerically accurate disparity in wealth. Is that a feature of our current paradigm, that some people have a lot more money than other people? Absolutely. So now this group of people decides that that is absolutely unacceptable and it should not be that way, and that it's the fault of the 1%, and then tries to rally everybody else to agree that the wealthy people are evil and they should not have all this money. Now, how do the wealthy people feel about this?
Bad.
Threatened.
Yeah.
And they now start to justify why they have all the money. And now we have a conflict. Now, I don't know about the tent city people, but did the Occupy Wall Street people put forth a new, carefully crafted economic system that was more egalitarian,
No.
but provided most of the features that the old one currently does?
No.
If they did, I didn't hear about it. Right? Just a lot of anger.
Not just that, they didn't take also personal responsibility.
No. This is about blame. It's their fault that the paradigm works this way, not our fault. We are the victims, the righteous victims, and they are the perpetrators.
We don't have that in Israel.
No. I know you guys don't do the victim perpetrator thing. Now, from the point of view of the 1%, who now a very large group of people has declared that they are evil and must be destroyed, they're feeling like victims. And that these other people are the perpetrators, right? The peasants are raiding the castle. They've got pitchforks and torches, and they're coming to get us. Right? So both sides feel like victims, and that the other one's a perpetrator. And they have a really good story to justify it. Does this sound at all relevant?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Familiar.
Vaguely familiar. Good.